One of the great difficulties of the contemporary left, certainly if we go back over the last 30 to 40 years, has been to deal with Stalinism. Why did their project of universal human emancipation end up with Stalinism in every sense? Why did it fail catastrophically, even in its own terms? Why did a doctrine of radical human rights, where all would love and all would congeal and all would come together in the fastness of our days, end up with the Gulag? And this is something that's very, very difficult to answer. Jean-Paul Sartre, the left-wing intellectual in France, who ended up as a Maoist towards the end of his life with Simone de Beauvoir, he attempted to answer it in an enormous philosophical work called The Critique of Dialectical Reason, based on Kant's volume of several centuries before. And Sartre was trying to synthesize existentialism and Marxism as two of the great currents of intellectual thought in the 20th century. But when he got to Stalinism, and when he got to the attempt to explain the internal dialectic and convolutions of the Soviet Union post Lenin's death and after the defeat of Trotsky and his sort of left opposition faction in the party in 1928, he hit a brick wall and he couldn't go any further. And the second volume of the critique couldn't be written because, in a sense, it's unanswerable even in the terms of his own theory. Bond believes that violence is irrational and proceeds from bourgeois man and the context of capitalist competition. But the problem with this, as is the problem with all Marxism, is there is a complete voiding of the biological realities of life. Man, men and women in all groups are 80% inherited, at least. 80% generic, 80% genetic, 80% hereditarian. And the socialised element, the naturalising, normative element, where we're reared through parents, the psychology that we're into, relationship that we have with them, we're culturalised through education and through behaviourism in a society, that's 20%. And even that is ecology, which is a species of biology. Everyone knows ecology is a subject area within biology. It's almost as if the 20%, which is actually given by naturalisation, that which is nurture rather than nature, to use old-fashioned formulations from the 1960s, is actually part and parcel of nature itself. Because who sets us up and what sets us up and primes us to be naturalised as human beings, if not nature itself? So there's an easy answer to Sartre and to Bond and other people of this sort who pretend that there is a deeply complex and invidious set of reasons as to why the left-wing projects ended up in the way that they did. It's now a canard, it's now a sort of species of rhetoric that Stalin's Soviet Union was one of the worst regimes that's ever existed in human history. I recently reread 1984 by George Orwell, which is a satire upon the Hampstead left of his day, and which is a satire against the Soviet Union at its time. I remember Peter Hain was once asked, what are the glories of Western civilization? Hain, of course, is an ex-South African liberal leftist who was head of the anti-apartheid movement when he came to this country. And Hain said there are no triumphs to Western civilization. He said that there's nothing to be proud of at all. All we've created is Hitler and Stalin. And don't forget he's on the centre-left. So to include Stalin is in a way a sort of a Mallarge own goal in relation to what could be perceived to be his own side. But the fact that Bond and Sartre and Hain, who's a much lesser intellect than either of those, compute the same failure is due to the fact that they irreducibly deny the biological basis to civilization. Race is culture and culture is race, essentially, put very tendentiously and very crudely, and far too crudely the many intellectuals would like or feel comfortable with. But there is a degree to which everything that exists has to come out of something which existed before it, and it has to have a primal root. It has to have a foundation. It has to be racinated, to use Simone Weil's term. It has to come from some egg or some implantation of self which gives birth to it.